Hey, so real quick before we jump into this video, quick public service announcement. I filmed this on the morning of February 6th, which is the exact day that Konami dropped the latest Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list on it. So that ban list definitely shifted some of the details of this video. Just keep that in mind when you watch this video. I'll try to put some comments and subtitles so you can see where things have changed. But again, I was considering whether or not to post it because this video will have been affected by the ban list. I'm deciding to post it anyway so you can see what this deck would have played like before the ban list, and again, give you some commentary on how it's changed. Anyway, let's go ahead and now jump into the rest of the video. Hey everybody, Befron here, and today we're talking about birds. All right, so as promised, we are talking about birds here on Befron TCG today, specifically some Yu-Gi-Oh! Birds. The most famous Yu-Gi-Oh! Birds, those are Floowandereeze, as you see right here in front of me. Just a little public service announcement before we get started. As a reminder, you are probably not subscribed, as only 1% or so of my viewers that are watching today are subscribed to my channel. So please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, hit that bell button down below, and let's jump in. So Floowandereeze is a fairly competitive deck right now. I'm partially making this as sort of a video log for myself to remember how I played. I know right now we have Photon Hypernova coming out very soon. We have probably a ban list coming out in the next couple weeks, maybe the next month or so. It's been a little bit since the last ban list, so I wanted to put this together. Right now, Floowandereeze is a fairly competitive deck. I think Tier Elements, it's fair to say, Tier Elements and Ishizu takes most of the format at this time, most of the meta, but Floowandereeze still places fairly highly in some tournaments here and there, and certainly with this deck I've done pretty well in some of my locals, so I wanted to share it with all of you. First, I'm going to do a deck list review in this video, and then in a future video I'm going to do a playthrough. So for those of you who want to play Floowandereeze, you can definitely do that. You can put a deck together and start playing it before the format changes too much. Hopefully, you know, Floowandereeze will stay relevant for a while. It's kind of a weird deck. It doesn't play along the long list of special summons and synchro summons and extra deck summons that most other decks do. So hopefully it's one of those decks that can kind of fly under the radar and not be affected too much by meta changes, and it'll stay relevant for a while. I like playing it, but we'll see how it does. And one of the things I particularly like about this deck, and you should see this in the cards that I show you, and if you look them up on TCG Player, this is a fairly budget deck. You know, compared to a lot of the other Ishizu Tier Elements, Sprite decks, this is way cheaper. So definitely recommend this if you try to play Yu-Gi-Oh! On a little bit of a budget. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at this deck list. So again, I will do a playthrough video in a future video, so you'll get a better understanding of what these cards do, but for now I'll just show you what's in the deck and explain some of my choices, assuming you're already a little bit familiar with Floowandereeze. So the first card in every Floowandereeze deck is Floowandereeze and Rabina. Nothing surprising there. You play a full 3-card playset, play a 3-card playset of Eglin, 1 Stree, and 1 token. So far that's the very standard Floowandereeze level 1, you know, starters setup. Then we play 2 M-Pen. This is occasionally you'll see somebody play 1 or somebody play 3. Pretty standard to play 2 though. And then I play 2 Barrier Statues. Previously, Barrier Statue was generally at 1 in most of these decks. Problem is that this deck really has no way to do recursion for Barrier Statue. Basically, once it lands in your graveyard, it's stuck there. There's really no way to get it out. So you play 2, so that way you can search for 1, have it on the field. Even if it gets destroyed, you can search for another one. So having that second one as a backup gets pretty important. The next 2 cards are not Floowandereeze cards, but they are Winged Beast, so they play into the archetype. Mist Valley Apex Avian to have an Omni negate, and Ryza to bounce stuff back to your opponent's deck and or to your deck and or the hand. Then we have 3 Dimension Shifters. This is obviously a great card. This deck has no problem banishing things, and of course it destroys Ishizu Tier Elements, so definitely a card that you want to play at 3. Then we have our spells in Floowandereeze, which are Magnificent Map. Again, you want to play these at 3. Floowandereeze and Advent of Adventure, you want to play these at 3. And the next card that tends to vary a little bit is Floowandereeze and Dreaming Town. This card, sometimes you see people play at 1, sometimes at 2, never really at 3. More recently, it's been more common to play it at 2 instead of 1 though. It's again kind of similar to Barrier Statue. It can take a while to get this card back to your hand. There's definitely ways in this deck to get Dreaming Town back into your hand, unlike Barrier Statue where it's impossible. You can get Dreaming Town back to your hand, but it can take a few turns or a few plays through different cards. And again, it's a trap card, so even if you do get it back to your hand, then you have to set it, wait your turn, and then play it. So it's good to have a backup to be able to have 1 on the field, 1 in the grave that you're trying to get back to your hand. The next one is Floowandereeze and Unexplored Winds. I still see this pretty consistently at 1. I play it at 1, but it's a card I'm considering playing at 2 in case it gets removed. It's a really, really good card. And again, we'll go into why it's so good in the next follow-up video. But a card that whenever I get it out on the field, I pretty much win because of the ability it has to remove opponent's stuff, anything, at cost. The next card is really the only card that's expensive in this deck is Pot of Prosperity. Floowandereeze can brick really bad, so it's important to have draw power, and Pot of Prosperity does that for you. Pot of Duality, of course, same thing. You don't need your special summons at all in this deck, so the restriction that keeps you out of special summons for Pot of Duality is not a problem. I also play 3 Pot of Extravagance. This card is probably the most contentious because it conflicts with Pot of Prosperity. Pot of Prosperity says you can't draw cards during the turn you play Pot of Prosperity, so it very directly conflicts with Pot of Extravagance. A lot of people don't play Pot of Extravagance for that reason, but I still like the card. I will also go over some possible alternatives to these cards, again, for people who don't like to play the Pot of Extravagance. I then play Evenly Matched. Luckily, this went down in price. I think it's probably below about $10 because of the recent reprint in Magnificent Mavens, which you can see that's the copy I have right here. So that's very nice. And then our last 2 odds and ends cards are Harpy's Feather Duster and Terraforming. Like I said, Floowandereeze can brick really bad, so just having another card that can search out Magnificent Map, which is the field spell card, is good. And Harpy's Feather Duster, I'm actually thinking about not maining this. I'll definitely keep it in my side as back row hate in case somebody plays Zombie World or something else that destroys this deck. But I still put it in main. It's good to have a nice little back row wipe just in case. So I'll put these off to the side. That is the entire 40 card main deck. I'll move these over here, and then we will go into the side deck. In the side deck, we have 3-dimensional barriers. Of course, these are great and pretty universal, right? I can play them against Ishizu Tier Elements. I can play them against Branded. I can even play them against Sprite. You know, Sprite kind of goes between Lynx and Xyz, and you can't really use Dimensional Barrier against Lynx, but still blocks out Xyz. Sometimes I'll even use Dimensional Barrier and call Xyz when I'm playing against Ishizu Tier Elements because a lot of people are starting to play Baguska, which turns off a lot of my deck. So I'll actually use this against Tier Elements to turn off Xyz monsters for a turn, and then use my next card, Non-Fusion Area, to turn off their fusions. And this card has been a total floodgate against Tier Elements decks whenever I play it. Huge help. I don't know why I don't see this more. I do really well against Tier Elements when I play this card. Next card, Dimensional Fissure. There's always more Banish in Floowandereeze. So some people play Macrocosmos, some people play Dimension Fissure, some people play a mix of the two. I really like Dimension Fissure because it's faster, of course, right? So you can play it right out on your turn. Really, when you're playing a lot of these decks, like Ishizu Tier Elements, the only cards you really care about banishing that much are the monsters. There's some benefit in removing spells and traps too, but really the value is in the monsters, so you remove that. This card also stops a lot of hand traps, which is the main reason I'm okay with Dimensional Fissure versus Macrocosmos. Specifically, on my turn, I can play it and it turns off Droll and Lockbird. So Droll and Lockbird is one of those hand traps that says you must specifically send it to the graveyard. So if Dimensional Fissure, you play it on the field, your opponent cannot use Droll and Lockbird while you're doing all of your searches for Floowandereeze. So definitely a huge advantage to Dimensional Fissure in my eyes, as opposed to Macrocosmos. Again, you play it right out and that turns off Droll and Lockbird entirely. That is the main reason I play Dimensional Fissure instead of Macrocosmos. The next 6 cards I'm not tied to too much. Raigeki, I just like it. It's saved me out a lot of situations, especially, again, most of the decks I will side in the first 9 cards that you saw, right? Dimensional Fissure, Dimensional Barrier, and Non-Fusion Area, because most of the time you're playing against your elements anymore. But for some of those decks where I just don't have anything in specific to play against it, Raigeki always sort of does the trick, especially, again, if you're going second. Same thing, Harpy's Featherstorm. Again, a super good card in this deck. If you control a Wing Beast monster, basically turn off all your opponent's monster effects till the end of the turn. And I do play just a little bit of extra back row hate in case somebody does run 3 zombie worlds. There's a couple other cards that really shut this deck off if you can't out them. So a little extra back row hate. I'm actually thinking about putting more back row hate in this deck because I've gotten hit pretty hard sometimes, but that is my side deck for now. As for the extra deck, it really doesn't matter. I tried to pretend it matters a few times and think about the cards. I've literally never played any card from my extra deck. I've played this deck multiple times at my locals. I've not played at regionals yet. I haven't been to regionals in a very, very long time, but I just play a few goofy cards that I think might come in handy. Relinquished Anima, great example. If I ever manage to steal one of my opponent's monsters, that would be awesome. I play the 3 Nightmares for removal. This guy to play back Dreaming Town. Appaloosa, again, like no reason I couldn't summon it at some point if I wanted to. At one point, I was playing Super Poly just for kicks and put in some of these guys. Again, I never summoned them, and you can see I didn't even take them out. Even when I stopped playing Super Poly, I didn't take them out because it really doesn't matter at all. Some Tri-Brigades, because those are easy enough to summon with all the Winged Beasts, and some Leerlisks. So again, I've never once played any card from my extra deck, so I don't think that'll ever matter. That's what I play. There's definitely a lot better cards you could play. I'm sure you could put Divine Arsenal Zeus in there, tons of other cards, but I've never played it, so I've stopped caring what I put in there. I want to go over a few other cards that are interesting that I have played, that I haven't played, that I've considered putting in. The first one is Lightning Storm. I used to play with this quite a bit, but it conflicted with the deck too much. I would have a Dimensional Fissure out already on the field. I would have my Magnificent Map out on the field. I'd maybe have just one monster out in the field. And just too often, I accidentally ended up turning my own Lightning Storms off. Also, it only destroys attack position monsters, so I can't remove Baguska, which in the past has been one of the main things I want to get rid of. So I did stop playing Lightning Storm, although, certainly when it hits, and it's great. The comment I made about Pot of Extravagance, a lot of people don't play it. A lot of people I see play a playset of Dark Ruler No More, just turns off all of your opponent's negates that they may or may not have. So this is probably the most common card I see played instead of the 3 Pot of Extravagances. I usually am up against your elements, which again, Dark Ruler No More isn't doing a lot to them. They'll replace their entire board very quickly, or just find a way to get rid of whatever I've turned off with Dark Ruler No More. So I've seen very limited success with Dark Ruler No More, but something to think about if you want to play this deck. And the last 2 cards, again, I could bring these in instead of the Terraforming or Harpy's Feather Duster, are Called by the Grave and Gold Sarcophagus. So Gold Sarcophagus, again, we'll go into how we play this deck in a future video, but Gold Sarcophagus is just sort of like an extender to help you not brick as easily, and just get some more cards in your hand. Banishing cards directly from your deck in Floowandereeze is just as good as basically putting cards in your hand. So very good card to just basically search your deck for really any card you want, and ultimately Floowandereeze will help you get it back to your hand. And Called by the Grave, I don't need an introduction for this card. I just found that not many people are playing hand traps anymore, and the only hand trap that absolutely destroys this deck consistently is Droll and Lockbird, which I already have coverage for with the Dimensional Fissure, and people only tend to side in Droll and Lockbird, games 2 or 3. So I already have Dimensional Fissure, I can bring that in. I don't really have a need for Called by the Grave. So those are some potential options that you can bring in. I don't play them, like I said. And the last card that I have never tried playing but want to play is a pretty interesting deck tech I'm thinking of with just Ghost Reaper. Not a Floowandereeze specific card by any means, but basically just remove your opponent's fusions, right? So I want to get a playset of my Tier Elements cards, Kit Kalos, Rule Calcos, put all those in my side deck, and just play Ghost Reapers and remove them all from my opponent's deck. So I guess it is a little bit Floowandereeze specific because I can only play it because my extra deck doesn't matter, right? So I can load my extra deck with, again, a bunch of Tier Element stuff, a bunch of branded stuff, and not really worry that I don't have any useful cards in my extra deck, play this, and I can remove all my opponent's key boss monsters from their extra deck. So something I'm thinking about playing. I actually don't have any Tier Elements cards myself, so I haven't been able to play this just yet, but I am definitely thinking about getting some play sets. Tier Elements fusions are coming down in price. I think they're about like $2 or $3 each now, so not too bad. And I can play this and really turn off a lot of my opponent's decks. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of my Floowandereeze deck? If you play Floowandereeze, let me know how you play it. Anyway, stick around for my next video where I'll go into how to play Floowandereeze. Anyway, thanks again for watching and see you next time.